We are live now.
That's the thing, yeah.
I did not get a chance to kick off that timer, but welcome everyone. Welcome to this next Hoot episode, the first one of 2024. Holy, I am so excited to be here with Christian, our CTO of Solo. How's it going, man?
Hey, I'm doing great. Really looking forward to this year. Never a dull moment in cloud native. And I think we're going to talk about a few things we're looking forward to in 2024 here.
Awesome.
Yeah. Go. You're gonna show the slide.
Yeah, I'm gonna pull this up. Just getting my shirt. You know, the one thing that I really hope that we get to figure out with StreamYard at some point in time is how. Ooh, this is not good. I don't want that going on. I want to stop sharing so I can get the full thing going. But one of the things that I really want to get, sorted out with StreamYard is how we can like dual screen share. Like there's sometimes I want to demo, and then I also want to at the same time just have like my terminal up so I can also like look up docs and shift between stuff. But let's rock and roll. All right, there we go. There's our slide deck. So what? So one of the things that we decided we wanted to do for y'all was get into some of the predictions and insights as to how we're looking at the market in 2024, how we're looking at the industry, the community, and seeing some of the technological trends show up. We've seen so much happen in 2023 in the sense of like the economic crunch, that constraint, that constriction. And so you see the pressures of organizations having to do more with less overall, right? And that has driven a lot of other organizations to become innovative in different ways to really propel how we optimize our operations. We've seen the rise of certain trends, and I think we really should get into that, right? So let's see what we got for 2024. Why don't we start off with that blog post around the XDS and Cium Scale?
Yeah, I think in general we're going to see still there's a few open source projects that are sort of the vanguard of what's happening in the cloud native networking space, and Cium is one of those. And as we look for like what's next or what's gonna happen, you look to those types of projects for innovation and continued maturing and working on use cases that wouldn't have up unless large enterprises were confident enough to take the leap and dive in and try it out. And I think what we just published a blog about how to take Cium and scale it out and more. Working with others in the community that have a shared interest in do this. And so yeah, like that example, and I think we're going to see others in these types of projects where people are using them, push them, breaking them, fixing them, and new innovations kind of crop up in those crevices or when it goes to those different motions. So yeah, I don't know if you want to bring up the blog and go into a little bit more, or you want to go through the various things we're going to cover today.
Yeah, let's go through the.
Are we getting an echo from me?
Yeah, getting an echo from you, I think.
This microphone's giving me trouble. All right, let me switch something. Audio. Can you?
Yeah, that's a lot better. I'm not getting an echo now.
All right. Oh, no, I've lost my mouse.
That's always fun. But
I don't know, my mouse.
That's
okay.
Fine. You're good to go?
Yeah. Did you want to go through the things that we're going to talk about? Or do you want to just dive right in?
Yeah. Let's dig into the next one, because something happened at the end of last year, which was almost a big surprise for the massive market and the community around acquisition, right? We saw Cisco buying Isovalent, and from the completeness point of view, that helps Cisco in a lot of ways, in that they needed to breathe new life into some of their existing approaches, technology stacks, and whatnot. And the innovations that we saw with respect to Cium is just that. And what are your thoughts around that whole acquisition, and what do you foresee happening?
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Because audio is cutting out in my ear. I heard what you asked. I think what I heard you ask was the Cisco buying Iceland at the end of last year. And,
yeah. Yeah, with Cisco buying Isovalent, what does that mean for the industry, for the market, and what does that mean for folks in the application networking space?
Yeah, I mean, I think like you were alluding for Cisco, it means that obviously they now have a large seat at the table in the Cium open source project. I think for their security and networking, the cloud native networking solutions that they're building, brings powerful underpinnings and innovative technology to that. I think overall it'll be good for the Cium project. I think having a the back from a large vendor and resources and all that is good. A number of other popular open source projects do have of large vendors. Overall, it's a positive thing for the Cium community and this project. We here at Sol have been contributing to the project, and Cium and EF and some architecture behind the scenes has been very important to us. Continue to push forward on what we think the higher level of abstraction should look, especially around Smash. And I think it just puts the Cium project on a very strong and stable platform that allows us all to continue very confidently with the project.
I love that. One thing I will say that now your audio is still, being a little bit wonky at the moment.
My audio,
sure.
When I hear you, it's wonky now.
Yeah, I think it's coming in and going out, and I'm not sure if maybe Peter, if you're on the back end there, ping me and let me know if my audio is coming across clearly, because I'm not quite sure what the connection issue here is. Anyways, I love that insight around Cisco buying Isovalent, because that's very telling of the rest of the industry. And there's another point that I have on here around that specific bullet point around acquisition. So we'll come back and revisit that. Now, let's take a slightly different look at the market and look at some of the other advancements and innovations going on in the cloud native space. For example, Gateway API. We saw it go GA just before KubeCon last year, or somewhere around that time frame. And that meant a lot of different things in the sense that, okay, there's standardization going on. There's flexibility as well that presents itself through this Gateway API standard. But what does that mean for folks that have invested significantly in the ingress resource? Right? What does that mean for folks that don't want to use the Gateway API standard and want to use something like what Istio offers naturally? What are your thoughts on that?
I think people are, especially ones that have invested in ingress resource, are pretty excited about the Gateway API being stable and starting to be offered by various gateway implementations. I think one of the challenges of the ingress resource that it was very underspecified, and that just opened looks to everybody just kind of adding a pile of annotations to try to configure their underlying code. Because a lot of times you need more than just open port and letting traffic in. You need to actually pull the traffic in way. And so Gateway API brings a more specification around that. Of course, it's very extendable and extend out, and there's always be the need to plug in value around how traffic comes into a Kubernetes cluster or system in general. But I think people are pretty excited about that. Now, that excitement, in my view, hasn't translated to wide adoption yet, probably because it just became GA, and probably because more and more vendors are now picked up. But I think, if we talk about what's going to happen in 24, I think that is a that is something that pick up steam. I think people will either migrate or start adopting parallel and slowly migrate off the previous. That's the event specific annotations all over the Ingress resource, or even some cases specific under APIs that that handled routing and traffic shifting and that kind of stuff. So I see the people are complaining about my audio. No, maybe it's headphones.
That's okay. So I'll give you a moment to maybe adjust your audio, and I can expand on some of the stuff going on with Gloo. Let's say Gloo Gateway, for example, something that Solo put together. And in fact, you could even go trial it out yourself. If you head over to the docs, solo.io's documentation section for Gloo Gateway, there are instructions on how to set up a Gateway API and get it running in your environment. And what's really cool about that is Gateway API, it's an open spec, and we want you, like the community, to actually leverage Gateway API in the most easiest manner possible, right? But I think what would also help is, like, let me show you the actual documentation for Gateway API. Now, something else to consider, if you're considering moving down the path of Gateway API 2, it sets you on the path of service mesh, right? The consideration is what you use as your gateway class. And if you decide you're going to put Istio in there initially as you onboard your services into a mesh, okay, well, you've got your Istio deployment ready to go. You decide, okay, I'm going to hand off this access to deploy gateways and expose some of my services to my operators. Okay, I can go forward and do that. And once I've done that, okay, now I can expose services altogether. Now I can continue to expand upon some of my existing services. Then I can slowly start to migrate additional services into that mesh. Christian, you are providing a lot of feedback on your end, and I love it.
Really?
Yeah, because I think you're getting audio coming in, and you've also got your mic turned on, but that's okay. That's all good. There's so many more things that we got to cover in this session, and I feel like there's some really key areas that we really need to think about. So let's think about for a second where we want to start using both Istio and Cium together. So we've gone down the path of open source, and we've begun to realize how problematic just doing this in open source can be because of the interoperability challenges that we have, the fact that these are two separate open source organizations that provide functionality, and we're trying to find that integration point, that interoperability point. And so one of the things that Solo has moved forward with is the announcement of something called Gloo Core, which is if you have your own CNI, which is Cium, or maybe some other CNI, and you've decided you have gone down the path of Istio, you need that little bit of extra push, that little bit of extra support. And that's where Gloo Core comes in. And I think the idea here is to really consider the fact that not every organization, not every team is ready for, a full-blown multi-cluster service mesh functionality, but they need something to kind of, warm them up to it, right? They need to really establish those day two operations, and something like Gloo Core in its form really enables that power, right? So it already takes what you have as a deployment. Got Istio and Cium deployed. Okay, so let me just read your existing configurations, and I'll port that into my platform and show you what I know about what you've already deployed, and maybe show you some insights as to how you can enhance that story a little bit better. So we're going to see a lot more of that. We're going to see a lot more of the ask of having to run both of these systems together, primarily because when you think about it, Istio services a lot of applications from the lens of that higher layer, like that layer 7. Like we're looking at everything from the application lens, but Cium or a CNI looks at it from the lower layers, right? As we start climbing up that OSI stack. So we're going to see some momentum with Gloo Core. We're going to see momentum with the combined usage of CNIs and service meshes when we have seen interoperability challenges. Now, there's been a lot around Ambient Mesh. Ambient Mesh is actually a flavor of Istio, a flavor that allows us to run sidecarless Istio. And the situation comes up where we have either race conditions, or we're over-consuming resources because of that sidecar, or we don't want to be intrusive with how we run our applications. And we still want them to be a part of the mesh. We still want them to take advantage of mesh functionality. So this is where Ambient Mesh comes in. And over the last couple of years, through Ambient Mesh communications, through having various people test this out in production or in their test environments before moving into production, we've started to realize, like, what works, what doesn't work, what we need to modify, what we need to change. And, now that we have Christian back, hopefully your audio is good. Maybe you want to say hello again.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. It's a little choppy, but it could be your internet.
My audio, it's choppy for me too. My audio is. I don't know what's going on. I think StreamYard's closing my computer.
That's all good.
Is it good enough that I can?
Yeah.
Or...
It's pretty good. Like I can make out most of what you're saying, and if anything comes across unclear, I'll probably just reiterate it.
Okay.
So what can you share about what you've seen around folks and the community and the industry wanting to consume Ambient Mesh? We want to push it to production readiness, but what have you heard? What have you seen? What are folks trying to do with this?
Yeah, that's a good question. On one hand, there are people that are extremely excited about it and they want to use it. They're hesitant to use it because open source still hasn't put a stamp of, hey, it's ready. Right, and open source is still considered alpha. There are various things that we're working through to kind of put the finishing touches on getting it into the beta state in open source Istio. When it gets to beta, that effectively means the API is not going to change, and we're still working on hardening it and so on, but it's ready. Right? It's a number of features in Istio that have been marked beta that people have been using in production long, years potentially. So I think that there's a people are eagerly waiting and they know about it, but they're not going to use it because the community still has it marked as alpha. So that's on the other hand, at Solo we do work with organizations that are POCing it and proving it out and getting it ready to use in their environment with our support and our help. I think you mentioned Gloo Core, right? It is part of our help with the Gloo Core product. And for those people, it's interesting to watch them actually take it and deploy it, check off their use. A lot of those use cases are just they need MTLS, and the number of folks that we've worked with that have said, "Wow, this was way easier than any experience they've had with Istio in the past or any other service mesh that they looked at." Like, I think one organization had been, one of the main folks that are leading it had been involved with Istio for the last 3 years and had used it, I think, at a previous job, and knew kind of what to expect, kind of like brace yourself for what this might be. But when they deployed, they were like, "Wow, this is unbelievable." I mean, what they wanted to do, and they allocated 2 weeks to do. I think they took them 2 days. So I think lowering the complexity, getting started, actually deploying it, proving out your use cases, the goal was one of the goals of Ambient. I think we're tracking pretty dead on with that.
I love that. And what's interesting is around the production readiness of Ambient, we started to realize the readiness of it with respect to CNIs. I mean, when you think about all the work that went in over the last year from multiple different parties and organizations to make Ambient work with multiple CNIs, why don't you tell us a little bit about why that occurred, and what was it in Ambient Mesh that prevented this from occurring to begin with, and why we had to go down the path of making this work for CNIs?
Yeah, good question. Ambient, in its initial release, we're proving out what this might look like, used a combination of IP tables and routing Linux, routing rules, and various firewall marking packets, and doing all this stuff that that conflicted with the way various CNIs worked, right? And so when Ambient was trying to apply networking, functionality in the host network namespace, and so was the CNI, then there would be collisions. So Ambient didn't really work on its initial release with that many CNIs, especially those that enforce network policy. But what we've been at Solo, we identified this pretty early on, and internally in our builds we had this solved. But we just recently, over the last month or so, maybe a long month and a half, we donated this work upstream to the open source project. That basically what it does is it moves a lot of what Ambient needs to do for routing packets to the pods network namespace, workload pods network namespace. So it actually is it looks a lot more similar to what we were doing with sidecars, but without running sidecars, right? So Ambient is still sidecarless mode, but when traffic goes and gets into Ambient and flows out through the rest of the mesh, we make it look like it's coming directly from the pod's network namespace. And when we do that, now any of the CNI policies that will typically run outside of the pod's network namespace, those can still be applied. So we made it from working with very few CNIs to working with every CNI. And changing a little bit, like I said, how the packets flow through the host. One particular area of it wasn't really a concern as much as it was sort of a distraction, I guess, for people that were familiar with and comfortable with, for example, MTLS originating in the pod itself when using sidecars, were a little bit hesitant when they saw that MTLS is now being originated in Ambient in some sort of shared layer 4 component. But now with supporting the CNIs more completely, we moved back to, well, MTLS actually originating inside the pod network namespace again. So it's the best of both worlds, where we don't have to run a sidecar, but we can run the routing logic inside the pods, the workloads, pod network namespace, and make it look like it's a sidecar, but it's not a sidecar. So to the application itself, it looks like it's running by itself. But when you enable Ambient, you automatically get MTLS and other benefits of the service mesh.
That's fantastic, and a lot of work has gone into the development and readiness of Ambient Mesh. So thank you, and thanks to the Istio team for making this a valiant effort and really pushing it forward. So there's another area that's come up, because last year there was a lot of usage around ChatGPT and generative AI tools and systems out there. One of the trends that I've been noticing is that folks are using generative AI to develop content, develop code, configuration of production systems. That's problematic. That's scary. And that's primarily because AI, or generative AI, suffers from things like hallucinations and various other factors and considerations around limited resources. So sometimes it might take longer for a response to come back, and it has to evaluate, should I provide a quicker response but lesser quality so that I can get that response over to that end user or whoever's asking for it. And that's something that could create symptoms of our network. down the line. So for example, if you asked it, hey, could you build me an Istio authorization policy for all these services that I've laid out in this YAML manifest, what can you do for me? Are we going to trust it? Are we going to say, yes, let's take what it's outputted and drop it right into our Kubernetes system or our ecosystem? And that could be dangerous in a lot of different ways, because we also assume that AI is always correct. There is a subtle assumption that AI could be correct in a lot of ways because, okay, look, it's looking at the documentation. It must be correct. It's reading things correctly. It's inferring things as we intend it to, but in actuality, it's not, right? And some of like my own testing, and I'm sure Peter, if he's around somewhere, could attest to some of his own testing as well. It's not perfect, and it won't generate the results that we're always looking for. So we have to kind of take some caution there as we're starting to explore how to use it more in our environments to optimize like our day-to-day lives. For example, like I don't want to be sitting there having to write blog posts all the time, so I'll get AI to do it. Is that a bad thing? Probably, because now you've lost the authenticity of Merino, right? That's something that I think most of us don't want to lose. We don't want to lose that human touch of, or that human eyes of when we provide a configuration to a system, making sure that it's good. It's like a recipe. We still have to double check it and make sure things look good before we provide that input to that system. Actually, before I get into that next one, what are your thoughts about AI and the usage of it?
Yeah, I don't have too much more to say other than I can promise for 2024 I will not use a Gen AI engine to write my blog post. Everything I write is from my hand.
Love it. All right, platform engineering is a very hot topic of 2023 and is very much a hot topic into 2024. What can you share about platform engineering?
So it's interesting because I think one of the other bullets that we'll talk about toward the end, but we talked about kind of the tightening of various budgets and how organizations are looking to optimize their their talent and their systems and cloud usage and so on. I think platform engineering, we're going to see even more interest, not because of just the buzz around it, but because organizations are looking for ways to optimize, how they run their businesses and their technology investments. Platform engineering is a way to kind of how do we take the best of what DevOps looks like, and because if you look at how organizations have implemented DevOps in the past, it's been pretty expensive. It's been really expensive. And that's back when organizations were spending. Right? Now they're tightening things up. So how do we get the best of DevOps and the philosophies around that and presenting it to developers and end users who are trying to deliver software, and automating away various pieces, enforcing standards and best practices, especially for, as you bring more of the workforce into this way of working, you want to be able to do it efficiently and do it quickly. And I think platform engineering is going to play a big role in how organizations end up doing that beyond just the buzz. Now, if you look at the buzz and the various technologies that are involved, of course, Kubernetes is still front and center. You see things like the UI and developer experience parts, things like backstages.io certainly comes up, and we see a lot of people who are very interested in that. But yeah, no, I think it's going to be more than just a buzz. It's going to be a necessity almost for these organizations to be thinking and looking at it like that.
I totally agree. I mean, KubeCon alone has separate tracks for platform engineering, both at the Colo event and even at the main event too. And when you start to sit in on some of those talks, you start to see how all of those different pieces are tied together. And it's a lot of glue. It's a lot of automation. It's a lot of systems thinking to make those platforms work. But here's the other question: like with with a lot of companies and organizations looking to build their own platform, why not just buy one? There are some systems out there, some platforms out there that do exactly what these organizations are looking for. So, all right,
Yeah,
there's another one here tied to that platform engineering motion around upward trajectory. And we talked a little bit about this last week when we were sitting down to decide this. So why don't you share a little bit about, and this is going to be tied to that very last point, which I don't want to talk about yet, but why don't you share some of that upward trajectory and what that means for maybe Solo?
Yeah, I think with the confluence of these various forces in the market, just like we just talked about platform engineering, technology that you absolutely need if you're going to be building various services and fitting them into a GitOps model, and things like gateways, API gateways, those won't go away. Things like networking, like the CNI layer, those are still very much in need. Doing things again, focus on efficiency and scale. So at Solo, at least we think Cium is from a data planning perspective extremely efficient, very performant. I think the first bullet point that we started talking about is how do we get to continue to scale Cium. Not everybody's going to be in this class, but scaling out to hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of nodes of clusters. Those power users do exist out there, and getting Cium to scale out to those levels. So I think CNIs, gateways, we're going to continue to see upward trajectory and usage. Now the service mesh part becomes very interesting because the organizations that are best equipped to start using a service mesh to solve challenges around service-to-service security, improving performance and avoiding things like API gateway hairpinning, getting consistent observability between services, in a service-to-service architecture. The organizations that are best equipped to take that on and solve it elegantly are those that are investing in platform engineering. So those two go very hand in hand together. So at least from a Solo perspective, we see the market kind of carving itself in a way that is it will need these solutions. These are unavoidable problems that people will have, and we feel like we're in a good spot to meet people where they are and to continue the innovation and solve these problems.
I appreciate that perspective there, Christian, which actually leads us to our very last one, the tech consolidation bullet point, because if you saw the acquisition of VMware by Broadcom, that was kind of the start of this season, right? And then you saw HashiCorp kind of did its own interesting acquisition of onboarding that BSL license, which if you look at it in some ways, it's an acquisition of, hey, now I'm going to take my business a little bit more privatized in some ways. And then you saw Cisco acquiring Isovalent and Splunk. So what does that mean for tech consolidation in 2024? Because I feel like this is going to become a recurring theme, and we're going to see less players overall. We're going to see some winners from a technology standpoint, and we're also going to see just more clarity in the market, right? That's how I'm seeing it. But what are your thoughts around tech consolidation?
Yeah, I mean, I see it very similarly. I think that there's probably not going to be too many new players joining. It's certainly the space that we're looking at, cloud networking and so on. And but there probably will be more investments in things like AI, and that's probably going to continue to grow. But otherwise, I see the market consolidating. I see the existing players out there. At least from our perspective, from a Solo perspective,
we see a very strong opportunity to continue again, like that upward trajectory. We're very well capitalized and so on, but other organizations might not be. And you know, I do think, you know, you saw Justin Garrison's blog post about Amazon. I think a lot of organizations are going to be feeling this, and yeah, it'll be interesting to see how things shake out. But I think that is sort of in the cards.
I agree. And I think, you know, to your point around Amazon, one of the biggest factors around AWS and what they're doing, or Amazon as a whole, and even some of these other big tech companies, is their RTO efforts, the return to office efforts. And that actually kills innovation in a lot of ways. It kills the asynchronous approach to being able to get shit done. Excuse my language, but that's the reality. Like, there's just so much that we have to do that, you know, having to come into an office, wasting several hours on the road just to come in and hop on a Zoom meeting, I don't know, doesn't sit well with me, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the occasional, you know, let's go hop in the office and all meet together and really team build and stuff, like what we're going to be doing very soon with the company, which is great. Like, that's something we look forward to, and the option to come in when we need to, or when we feel like there's a compelling need to be there to, you know, collaborate. But, you know, you're going to now see that the folks that really truly adored adored the work from home are going to leave these big companies, just like we saw with Justin, right?
Mm-hmm.
This with others. There are others that I know about that have already left their organizations because of these RTO mandates. But that means they're good for us. I mean, now we have the opportunity to tap into this talent. So
Right.
it's a good
Yeah.
sign.
I thought, at least in general, apparently I don't lead these big companies, so maybe I just don't know, but I thought we got pretty good at working remotely over these last few years. Very good. You know, certainly at Solo, we have a remote policy, right? Most of us are distributed. The engineering team is fairly concentrated in the Boston area for the most part. Even that, you know, we have a number of engineers that are not, but yeah, it's certainly going to be interesting to watch how 24 plays out. And like I said, I thought we've gotten really good at the remote working, but maybe not. I don't know.
I love it. I can't see myself ever going back. All right, you know, just
Yep.
before we close off, I want to hit back that XDS and Cium scale. So I'm going to drop that
Yeah.
right here, and maybe if you can spend like 5 minutes talking a little bit about the motivations behind why you and Shashank decided to write this blog post. And I think you'll probably do another Hoot at some point in more depth. But tell us a little bit
Yeah.
about this post.
Yeah. It comes down to areas that we at Solo have been working. So we've been working with a few partners in the background for the last probably 6 months or so, maybe a little longer, but on what it looks like to take Cilium and run it at scale. And we've also noticed in parallel a number of folks in the community also start to percolate these communities, and they're all linked in the blog post, around challenges that they see with Cilium running in scale for certain classes of use cases. Right? This is not general. Like, you take Cilium and run it out of the box, I mean, it runs near perfectly, right? It's fine. But once you get into like 200, 300,000, you know, 300 nodes in a cluster, 1,000 nodes in a cluster, then there's some things that you should definitely be aware of, and might cause some heartache. So with this blog post, really wanted to dig into how the Cilium control plane is architected and where you might start to see things kind of go. You know, there's certainly room for improvement in how we can complete that part of the story. So in this blog post, we walk through a lot about how things work, and as you take scale up, including the number of nodes in a cluster, number of workloads in a cluster, then, you know, what actions that are common actions, like things like labeling namespaces or labeling workloads, how that affects
the scale and the performance of the system. And in that diagram, we just try to equate it to how we've seen previous architectures and how we've wanted to scale and so on. But then we walk in and look at some of the solutions. There are solutions for this today. But then taking some of the best practices, at least that we've learned here at Solo, and combining it with what we believe we can do in the Cilium community and working with others. By introducing the XDS protocol and kind of shifting around some of the architectural pieces, that we can get to better scale, better security, and a better overall posture for Cilium. I encourage people to look through that blog. We can do a Hoot specifically on this topic as well.
That's fantastic. All right, thanks for providing that insight there, Christian. All right, well, we want to thank you all for coming along today for our insights into 2024 and what Solo is doing, what the community is doing, and what we see happening in that application networking space. Y'all got to go check out some of the stuff on academies.solo.io because we've got content for you. We've got stuff for you to help you understand how Istio, Cilium, Envoy, Kubernetes, eBPF, how they all work, and then how you scale them all together when you're operating in an enterprise environment. So go check it out and reach out to us. Hit us up on solo.slack.com and you should be able to connect with us and ask us anything you want. Christian, any final thoughts or words?
No, I'm excited about 24. Looking forward to getting out into the conferences and meeting people in person again. And I'm just pretty excited.
Awesome. Well, we'll see you all out there in the community and conferences. Take care, everyone. We'll see you on the next Hoot. Have a great day.